welcome back to the Witchy Web Weave. I'm Alara.
Alex.
And today is the continuation of our Tarot Tuesday series. Today we're actually going to be talking about the High Priestess, which I'm going to go ahead and put a little photo up right in here. So the High Priestess, I really actually enjoy this card. I think it's a really neat card to look at. But the High Priestess is really all about like intuition, inner knowing, things like that. So let's go ahead and we'll go into the symbolisms of this card, and then I'll do the same thing as I did before. Some pros of the card, some cons of the card as far as meaning, and then maybe some examples or, a little thing to tie it all together at the very end. So when you're looking at the High Priestess, one of the things that can really draw a reader into it when you're looking at the card is the fact that it's this beautiful lady sitting, and she's all garbed up, and she's got a wonderful headdress on. She's sitting on a throne in front of two black and white columns with a veil often being depicted behind her, being strung up between the columns. And you can kind of, when you're looking at the High Priestess, one of the first things in all of this backdrop that you notice is the fact that she's wearing a crown. She's wearing a headdress. And often when you're seeing this headdress, it is a very distinct look of the top halves of two crescent moons pointing out, and then a center circle. Most of y'all will recognize this as being very similar to the triple moon or the triple goddess sign. And that's there for a reason. But it's also the fact that she not only has the headdress with the moons in it, but she also has the crescent moon at her feet. The High Priestess is all about the subconscious. She's all about this idea of mystery and lunar energy. And actually, this is something that I'm going to repeat later on when I get through with all the cards. I'm going to go into some other different elements that can tie into tarot. One of those being planetary correspondences and things like that, which actually with the High Priestess, her planetary correspondent, her ruling planetary sign is the moon.
Oh, okay.
So there's a lot of lunar energy that is very heavily associated with her. Sometimes it's a lot easier to see it in this particular card than it is for other planetary signs within other tarot cards. So that's why I make a big deal about pointing this out. Because not only does she have the triple moon in her head, in her headrest, but she also has the crescent moon at her feet, symbolizing her very deep ties to the subconscious. And also, when you look at her, she is garbed kind of similarly to the Magician in a lot of ways, where she is garbed in white, purity, things like that. And then she has a veil on, or a overrobe of blue, which again, blue and white, these colors are going back to that, what I've mentioned before. It's all about, with her, it's subconscious, it's intuition, she's very heavily connected to inner knowing. And this also gives you another key hint with these colors that she's also very deeply connected to dreams. I like working with the High Priestess a lot when I'm doing dream work, or when I'm trying to work through my dreams or call dreams or set up a spell to help me have the ability to kind of walk about my dreams, things like that. So when you're looking at the High Priestess, I mentioned it before when I was kind of laying out the description of what you're going to be seeing in this image here. She sits on a throne between two columns, one black, one white. There's a reason for that. The black column is symbolizing of negative life force. The white column is symbolizing of positive life force. And actually, oftentimes when you see these two columns, they will have a letter B written on the black column and a letter J written on the white column. This is for Boaz and I can't say it very well, Jachin, but it's Jachin. And these actually go back to the two pillars of King Solomon's temple, things like that. There's a lot of things in tarot that is closely connected to the Kabbalah, especially with the Rider-Waite series. Closely connected to the Kabbalah, closely connected to Christian, Christian stories, Christian
Themes.
symbolism, themes, and Christian mysticism, things like that. So that's kind of where those two columns go for, and it's a very clear representative of the positive and negative of life. But it also frames her in a way with the veil being strung up between them behind her, with the symbols of pomegranates on the veil. This symbolizes that she literally sits, she's the guardian, she's the gatekeeper, she is the holder of the gateway of death, of the underworld. It's very harkening back to the story of Persephone with the pomegranates. But it's also, I'm going to go off on a tiny little tangent. When it comes to pomegranates, there are a lot of Christian scholars who have thought that originally the apple tree in the Garden of Eden was not an apple tree but a pomegranate.
Mm-hmm.
And pomegranates have a lot of symbolism with the idea of creation, life force, inner knowing or divine knowing or special knowing, secret knowings, things like that.
I've heard that too, and I wondered if people just didn't know what a pomegranate was, and they were just like some fleshy fruit with seeds.
Could be some
like apple.
Like this. I'm only going basically off of memory. I don't know how accurate it is for me to say it, but I'm going to go ahead and just say it, and anyone can correct me if you find out otherwise. But I want to say, remembering back, that the reason why scholars thought that it got switched from a pomegranate to an apple tree happened more and more as Christianity was taken into the European countries. Like as it traveled north, pomegranates are kind of out of season up there.
Mm-hmm.
So, but apple trees are very well known. Apple orchards are kind of everywhere up in the European.
Yeah, I was gonna say pomegranate also makes more sense in the Middle East than apple does.
Yeah. So that's why. So it could have been something that started shift. As there was migration of that particular religion. So yeah. But the whole thing, there's more going on also with the high priestess and her garb and the veil. Because not only does she have the shroud, the veil strung up behind her, but she also is adorned in a veil oftentimes. This is another thing that goes back to symbolizing of purity. And it also ties in a little bit more closely with the idea of not just purity, but virginal.
I was going to ask if any of this had to do with...
Yeah. And actually, one of the figures that is closely associated with the high priestess is not only that of Persephone, but also that of the Virgin Mary. And a lot of people also get this not only because of her, her veiling and her adornment and the way that she is sitting, but also in the fact that oftentimes the high priestess is shown with a cross, literally right here on her chest. So she is very, very similar. She harkens back a lot to the imagery of the Virgin Mother Mary. But the cross is not just there for that illusion. It's also a depiction that she is divine intuition. She is divinely set. So not just her inner knowing and her inner knowledge is not just whatever she comes up with and whatever she decides or whatever, she creates, but it's also she is deeply connected to what I refer to as the cosmic egg, the cosmic universe, all of the bubbly goodness of the universe. She is tapped into that live wire. A lot of times the high priestess is also depicted, kind of going back to this whole divinely set or things like that. She's also often depicted with a scroll, either in her hand or in her lap, sometimes partially covered up by her garb. And sometimes in these depictions with certain decks, it's just a rolled up scroll. You have no idea of what is in it or you can't see anything of it other than it's a scroll. But in the traditional Rider-Waite, one of the things that scroll is actually, you can see the most of the words of Torah written on the scroll. Literally, she is not only just divine, but she is very closely attached with the idea of the law, of the divine law, of the natural law, the natural order of things. So a lot of times the high priestess, she is very in touch with these secret understandings of the law of nature, of the law of the universe, of the law of the workings of things. Because a lot of us, we live and breathe and we walk in this earth, but we don't always understand the inner workings or we're just walking about on earth. We don't really have a direct feed into how everything actually goes on, how it all properly works, and the greater understandings of everything. But she does. So that's a very thing, it's a very important thing to kind of keep in the back of your mind when you're thinking and looking at the high priestess. But yeah, some of the key words that I kind of keep in my mind when I think about the high priestess, I'm going to go ahead and just kind of list some of them, is divine intuition, inner knowing, heavy connections with dreams. She is the silent watcher. Oftentimes whenever you're talking about the high priestess in like the Fool's Journey or in like a story type setting, she doesn't speak. She doesn't talk to you. If you ask her questions, she'll just look at you. And you can either just talk to her and she will sit and she will listen and say nothing. You can walk away because, who wants to talk to you anyway? Or for those, as the story goes, for those that are truly interested in gaining inner knowing or inner knowledge or, knowledge of greater things, the story goes, if you sit in silence with the high priestess, meditation, she's all about meditation. Meditate with her and you will come away knowing more than what you originally did when you sat down with her. But she is the unknown knower. She is the seer behind the veil. Sometimes with this particular card, if it is well detailed, oftentimes when you look at the card and you look behind the actual veil with the pomegranates on it, you can see water, like a great lake behind her, symbolizing the subconscious, the collective unknown, the collective unconscious. Which, for any of y'all that listen to me for any amount of time, you'll know that I'm a great, I like the idea of the collective unconscious, and I kind of try and walk around it a little bit. Like this, that's kind of my thing. So it makes me happy to think that she is kind of the guardian and the doorway to the collective unknown, the collective conscious, or the subconscious. So when we're looking at the pros of this card, when you're trying to sit down and actually interpret it or finding meaning if you draw it, some of the pros that come with the high priestess are it can depict secrets or mystery, intuition, like I've said before, spiritual knowledge, or it can just simply mean silence or the need to be quiet to gain perspective, which ties in very closely with some of my interpretations of the Hangman. But hers comes more from, rather always from experience, hers is more from wisdom. But it's not always her own experiences. It's because she sits and she listens, she watches. She is tuned in to everything that is happening around her with other people and not just herself. So sometimes it's not just her own experiences she has wisdom from, but that of others. Which is why one of the big meanings of this card, if you draw it, is the need for introspection or communing with nature or your higher up, your divine, or even communing with a group. Sometimes is what I've gotten from her. Or sometimes she will represent empathic connections. For those of you that are very keyed into other people's emotions. That's why I get her a lot. Is sometimes I get her when I'm doing readings regarding my empathy stuff, because sometimes it gets a little overwhelming when you can kind of always feel the energy of everyone. But when you're looking at the other side of the High Priestess, when you're looking at meanings and interpretations, so some of the cons with the interpretations of this card can be the idea of shallow or even empty knowledge, pretending to know more than you really do. She can also, in a negative interpretation, she can also mean just outright deceit, or think of it like a snake oil salesman, like that. Someone that's actually trying to sell you something sometimes. She can also represent detachment, like emotional detachment or even spiritual detachment. And I've also seen her represent the idea of, with your spiritual journey, that you're going too deep too fast.
Okay.
That you're getting lost in the void. You're not just up to your knees or up to your hips, you're up to your neck. And that you may need to slow things down or stop and kind of pull yourself out and don't drown yourself in it. And she can also mean blocked intuition and things like that. There is a quote that I came across that I really enjoyed with the idea and the connection of the High Priestess, and I actually found it in one of my books when I was doing some brush up for this particular card. And it's actually from Albert Einstein. In his preface to Max Planck's Where is Science Going? So the quote is, "But there is no logical way to discovery of these elemental laws. There is only the way of intuition, which is helped by a feeling for the order lying behind the appearance. And this Ephelum, it's a German word, kind of meaning empathy. So, and this empathy is developed by experience." So I really liked that. I thought it was a really good way of kind of explaining how all of these things tie together and how she's very closely connected with some of these ideas. But yeah, when you're talking about actual examples of this archetype, if we're going based off mythology, the ones that I've already mentioned are really good. Like Mother Mary, to some degree, for part of an aspect of this. Another one being Persephone, because some people, she's not just the figure that, helps bring in the seasons and things like that, but it's also the idea that she's a figure that walks around the underworld. Mm-hmm. That can be either legitimately, literally walking around in the underworld, or walking around and getting very familiar with death, or in some ways, I not only view the underworld as the literal death, but also the idea of the underworld as the collective unconscious, as the deep dark unknown, things like that. They're separate but very closely connected in my own mind. But when I'm actually looking for my own interpretations or my own examples of the High Priestess, I do like the historical idea of the Oracle of Delphi. Mm-hmm. Just because that's kind of from articles and what we have on sources, that's kind of how they viewed them, is that they were very tapped in to the unknown or to the other. And they have a lot of that mystery and intuition and things like that tied into kind of that connotation, I guess. But also, Pamela Barnes, I think Barnes is her last name, Pamela Barnes, she is a character on Supernatural.
Oh.
Yeah. But she's a psychic that helps out Sam and Dean, the brothers, from time to time. And her character, she's very sassy, she's very spunky, but when it comes down to it, when you really kind of look at her character and who she is, she knows a lot about things that happen on the other side and that are other, because she talks to spirits. She works deeply with her intuition. She can read cards, she can commune, and all of these different things. So she literally kind of represents that being tapped in to something other than that can be plainly seen in this world. Another one that I like using when I think of the High Priestess is the Teen Titans character Raven, because not only does she have that understanding and knowledge from her own lineage, but she has come to this understanding through her own powers that she has to have control, self-control, very tightly gripped self-control, but she gains it by trying to find inner peace. She does a lot of meditation. She does a lot of exercises to tighten her control and to tame herself. And I find a lot of that energy can be represented a lot in the High Priestess. Of that sometimes it's better to learn and better yourself through trying to be still and be quiet. And then applying your knowledge of whatever else through that. So that's pretty much most of what I have for this particular episode for the High Priestess. I hope that this was beneficial. I hope that you learned something or at least had fun with it. But if you have any questions, comments, anything like that regarding the High Priestess, feel free to leave it in the comment section below. I would love to hear what y'all think or what y'all have to say regarding the High Priestess. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in 2 weeks. All right, bye.